Sometimes if we want to push the boundaries of our own sound, of our own music, we need to step out of our comfort zone. And that's what I did on the latest release for Wells. Wells is a project I'm working on with my good friend Stephen Barton from Close the Hatch. And it's sort of a groovy, fuzzy, sludgy, I say modern fuzz, modern sludge, if you will, for lack of a better term. I just coined it, so it's cool. Anyhow, it's a different sound for me, musically, sonically, and it's got vocals. Steven does the vocals, but I digress. The point I'm trying to make is I approached the production differently. I wanted it to sound different than everything prior to this, everything that's been under the Nick Hill name. And as we're going to discuss with my previous work, I just used Superior Drummer and all of its tools and mixing processing inside of the plugin. I have been intimidated by mixing drums and still am, but I wanted to push those boundaries, push my own limitations, and go about mixing the drums in a different way, in more of a real way. I sent individual kit pieces to their own tracks and mixed it in a more kind of real production type of way. I have processing on the kick, processing on the snare, the toms, rooms, the overhead, everything like that. I mixed it in a more traditional way, the very thing that I've been overwhelmingly intimidated by and why I leaned on Superior Drummer so heavily to this point. I didn't use Superior Drummer. I used a VST called Perfect Drums, and it is quite amazing for the price, for the sound that you get. And as a guitar player who really doesn't like to get distracted by all the minutia, you guys know me. I want to be writing music. I want to dive in and get creative and make music. And we discussed this and on Bandless all the time about being distracted by whether it be guitar tones, guitar amps, guitar plugins, impulse responses, anything that we think we need to make music that ultimately can become a hindrance and a distraction from doing that very thing we're supposed to be doing, and that's making music. What the hell am I trying to say? The point is, Perfect Drums is an amazing drum VST that sounds pretty damn spot on great out of the box, and it's the drum VST I chose to use on the Wells project. Again, to set it aside, to set it apart sonically from the music that I've produced to this point. Perfect Drums is sort of like a really good in-between. Think of it as an in-between between Easy Drummer and Superior Drummer 3. Superior Drummer, you have hundreds of articulations for every piece of the kit. Easy Drummer, you have some less articulations and a little less mixing control. Perfect Drums sort of bridges that gap. You have not as many articulations as far as individual kit pieces as Superior Drummer, but you have maybe a little bit more mixing and processing flexibility inside of it. You do have a number of drum choices and options, like you do with Easy Drummer and Superior Drummer. And as we're going to discuss, there is a level of effects processing that you can do inside the plugin. But I also mix these in a little more traditional fashion, which was intimidating and frightening, but it turned out well in the end. And I think the proof is in the pudding. You can check out how the drums sound on the Wells Anoxia EP. It's available everywhere. It's also available for sale on Bandcamp. Pretty proud of it. Steven and I are massively looking forward to writing more, and we're already in the process, so that's exciting. So why don't we head over to the computer and check out what I did, what I stumbled through to get the drum sound on the Wells Anoxia EP. If you're into guitars, riffs, mixing, and everything in between, hit subscribe and follow along. So prior to this project, everything released under my name, Nick Hill, I've used Superior Drummer 3. I love Superior Drummer, but I wanted this to have its own sound, and upon this being recommended to me, I gave Perfect Drums a shot. Think of it as sort of an in-between between Easy Drummer and Superior Drummer. You're not going to get as many as articulations as Superior Drummer, but you have a little more control and mix options than Easy Drummer. So it's kind of like a medium middle ground, especially for guitar players who just want a good sound basically out of the box so that they can start demoing, tracking, or in my case, using it on full-scale productions. Another thing I kind of steered away from which, you know, I was sort of using Superior Drummer as a crutch here. I had such a customized and personalized preset inside of Superior Drummer for the sound I wanted over the course of the last few years that I did basically all my drum mixing inside of the plugin, and I didn't bounce anything out to its own individual tracks. I didn't do any real mixing inside of a DAW when it came to drums, other than maybe setting the snare to be a little bit louder so that my top-down mix compressor, my bus compressor, could kind of control the snare a little bit. But other than that, I just basically let the plugin do most of the work and mixed the rest of my track around the plugin. Again, with this project, I wanted to try something different. I wanted it to have its own sound. So I stepped out of my comfort zone and pushed individual drums to their own tracks. The kick, the snare, the toms, the hi-hat, overheads, room mics, reverb, etc. I actually did somewhat of a proper drum mix on this. So that's what we're gonna go over. I'll show you what I did for the Wells project. The same is gonna be applied to both tracks that came out on the Anoxia EP. So why don't I shut my hole and let's take a look at what we did, huh? So I'll bring up the interface and give you a little sound, a little sample of what it sounds in the mix, and then I'll solo the drums.
Shall walk beside him.
Okay, cool. So as you can see, it looks similar to some of these other drum VSTs. It's not going to be that different. Same kind of thing. You right click, you can change the drums. There are drum options here. So we got same with the snare. Toms. You get the point, right? The nice thing is you can also add samples in to kind of layer stuff if you want. Clearly you can see I did not take advantage of that in this, but it offers you a little bit more flexibility. And then you have the mixer, which is again, not unlike maybe Superior Drummer or Easy Drummer or Slate drums. You have the control over the direct signal, over the mix of the overhead. So as an example, you can control how much of the kick you send to the overhead. You can control how much kick or snare or any of these other drums you send to the room, reverb, and then there's an effects knob here that basically does some processing on said instrument, in this case the kick, the snare. Obviously I have that turned up. Again, mixing drums is out of my comfort zone. It's out of my wheelhouse. I don't practice it hardly at all. So I am leaning on some of the effects, the processing inside of the plugin, but I went a little bit further and did a little bit more. So without getting too much into the woods with the routing, I basically sent, you know, everything to its respective track. I got the kick going to a track, the snare going to a track, all the toms going to a track. I have the hi-hat going to a track. The ride and the bell are going to the same track. And then I have the chinas going to a track, and then the overheads, the room, and the reverb going to their track. And inside of Studio One, pretty simple here. You can select the number of tracks you want and I have kick, snare, toms, hi-hat. This is mislabeled out 5, which I don't remember what it is, but let's not get lost into that, huh? Overhead, room, and drum reverb. So I have that set up, that's nice. Let's hide that, and you can see we can individually now solo stuff. Bring this up. Kick, snare. Now obviously I have some processing on it, so it sounds a certain way. I also have all these drums going to a drum comp or a kind of parallel compression. And so you can see I got the kick, the snare, the toms, the overheads, the rooms, and the reverb going to this drum comp. And if we were to just listen to this, nothing happens. So if I was to take all of these things and not send it to the drum comp, this is what the drums would sound like. Still sound great, sounds really good, but in the context of the mixed, we need a little more oomph. So it adds a little more smack and slam to the kick and the snare, and a little more washiness from the rooms and the overheads. So let's go through that, huh? So here's the kick, and I have some EQ happening here, and virtual mix rack with a little bit of compression. So I'll toggle the EQ. So I'm just getting rid of some of that papery sound. Little box. And then adding some thud. And some click. And then the compression, you know, it's doing its thing. I'll turn it off. A little bit of a slap added to it. And then if I turn on the drum comp, you can hear what it's doing. Just real in your face type of stuff. Now let's go to the snare. The snare, I have some EQ, a little compression, or a little more EQ. I'm using, actually, yeah, a little bit of upper mids and some line level distortion, and then some compression with the FG Bomber, and then some mid-air with that plugin. So let's listen to it. I will turn off everything. EQ. And you're probably thinking that's pretty subtle, it's not doing much, but just getting rid of that low end thud. Depending on the context of the song, you might want that. In this mix, I don't need it. I kind of liked the ring, so I added a little bit back in. And then we'll add in what this is doing. So you can hear some high-end stuff happening. And then we'll turn this on and we'll see what it's doing. Obviously it's adding a little bit of nonsense in the high end. You can hear some hiss, if you will, but it's adding a little bit of that upper mid smack. And I liked how it sounded in the mix. So there's that. And then I'll show the difference adding it to the parallel compression. Obviously there's a huge jump in volume, but there's a lot more smack really present. See if I can find a tom part. So here's the toms. Add the EQ. And then I just got some compression. There's only one here, I'm not using this one. Off. On. Probably not the greatest example, you know, with the swell, but you can hear it adds a lot more. You can hear it's adding a lot more body and kind of, you know, bringing up that low end. And then with the parallel compression as well. Real boomy, real kind of, you can hear the room a little bit more. So there's that, and then the overheads. Let's listen to it. I'll turn everything off first. And I'm using Virtual Mix Rack here and making some EQ moves, rolling off some low end, some compression, adding in a little bit of sizzle and high end, and then doing a little bit more control. So let's see what this does. So it is kind of crushing things a little bit. You're getting a little bit more of that room. You're getting some of the wash of the cymbals, which is why, and I'm rolling off some low end down here, as you can see, and then adding a little bit more air. I'm rolling off at about 73 Hertz. And then with this, I am controlling some more stuff. So let's hear what we're doing here. Some boom. And then I'm getting rid of some whistle, probably from the hi-hat. Yeah. And then with the parallel compression, cool. And let's listen to the rooms. And again, I'm doing a lot of the same moves on the room. Almost, it might be even identical. I might use, yeah, I'm using the same EQ. And I think I'm using probably the same settings aside from the compression, maybe a little bit of a difference. And this is what really gives it that boombastic kind of room sound. So let's turn this off and we'll hear the difference, and I'll add it back in. So yeah, and then we'll add in the parallel compression for the room. Cool. So you can imagine the sum of all the parts, the room with the overhead and the snare itself, it really adds up, especially with the parallel compression. You know, it's a balance of all these things. And again, I suck at drums, but I'm just sharing what I did because I think the end result turned out pretty good. So, and then lastly, I have some drum reverb here. Let's listen to that. And I'm just doing some compression and some roll off. I think just the snare, maybe the toms are going there too. Yeah. So it's basically just the snare that I'm sending this to the reverb. So let's turn off these moves to see if it's actually doing a ton of work. And I think I rolled off all those lows because I just wanted that washiness of the snare. It could go against every rule that people do. I mean, like I said, I don't know how many times I have to say this. I am not by any means good at mixing drums. Some might say mixing in general, but this is what I did. So keep your comments to yourself, huh? And then that's going to the parallel compression as well. And again, I'm just using the Virtual Mix Rack FG Stress, and I'm sending everything to it. Pretty dope right there, okay. And then the drum bus, what do we got going on here? Oh, that's the drum comp. Drum bus. I have an EQ on there that's not doing anything, and then I'm adding a little bit high end from, let's see what that's doing. We'll listen to everything. So it's adding some of that air, for lack of a better word, and high end. Maybe, or could arguably be too much, but to each his own. So that's my basic drum mix, individual mix. Again, I'm kind of cheating because I'm doing a little bit of processing inside the plugin. But until I get to a point where I feel more comfortable, that's what we're gonna do, folks, okay? And again, I have parallel compression, or I have my top-down mix going, so I have some EQ moves happening here. Basically, I'm sort of creating a smile as an EQ move, but, you know, using something without graphics. You know, I've gone over top-down mixing before. There's plenty of other videos that I've done on the topic. If you want to get more into that, type Nick Hill top-down mix in YouTube, and you will definitely find it. This is the other component. I learned this, stole this, adopted this from Nully. Get Good, formerly of Periphery, the bass player. He still produces, mixes, and plays bass with the band. But anyway, from watching several of his master classes, I sort of adopted this top-down mix from him. I liked the results he got. So there we go. And you can see here that the snare, when the snare hits, it's doing some compression. Now, obviously, short of turning off the limiter, there's a certain amount of thing that's happening to the drums from the top down. So I'll add that stuff in individually. Well, we need to have this trimmer in because obviously it's super loud without it. Let's try that again. Now, why am I showing you all that? Well, because it obviously has an effect on the overall tone and sound of the drums. But once I decide I'm 90% there and I begin my mixing process, I put my top-down mixing effects on and I mix into them. That's how I do it. That's how I learned from Nolly and other guys that I've studied online, not in real, obviously. And it yields results that I like. So, you know, this is again something different for me. I stepped out of my comfort zone to mix these drums in a different way, and I think it has a different vibe and a different sound than all of my other music, which was the point. That was the goal. And you know, I hope it kind of inspires you to step out of your comfort zone and inspires you to try different things and suck at it if you have to, because it's taken me a long time to even get the balls up to try this. And, you know, changes and improvements can clearly be made. I'm sure many professionals would frown upon the way I'm doing this, you know, but it's all subjective. At the end of the day, it's the end result of the track. So I hope you get something out of it. I'll play another little chunk. And we'll see you on the flip side. All relating information and links can be found in the description down below. And if you found this video helpful, hit subscribe and stay up to date. So, such is the state of the world that we need to preface thoughts, personal thoughts and opinions with, like, these are just my thoughts, these are my opinions on how to go about this. This is not a tutorial, this is not a masterclass. I've been pretty open and candid about not being comfortable or good at mixing drums. I tried it on this and it turned out pretty good. I'm happy with the results. I can't wait to get better and maybe rely less on some of the processing that's going on inside of these plugins. And, you know, it's just gonna take time, it's gonna take practice. The point is, I hope you learned something. I know a lot of you guys have showed us massive amounts of love for the Wells EP so far, and for that, I'm grateful. And if you like how that sounds, I wanted to give you a little bit of behind the scenes of how I tackled the drums and how I went about getting a different sound than all of my previous music. So I hope you get something out of it. I really do. Thank you guys so much for being here. Special shout out to those of you supporting me on Patreon and of course here as members on YouTube. And if you're looking for other ways to support me, the channel, and what I'm doing, of course, I have all this music for sale. It's available on Bandcamp for sale and streaming everywhere music is streamed. I also have Helix preset packs available on my webpage, nikhilmakesmusic.com. I'm working on a preset pack for the sounds that you hear inside of Wells. It'll be guitar and bass and some clean. So keep your eyes open for that. Looking forward to sharing that with you guys. Once again, thanks so much for being here. I hope you're all doing well. Stay safe, take care of yourself, be useful to someone, and we'll see you in the next one.